Well, it delivered. Hit Me With Your Best, Scot is a Regency romance novel written by Suzanne Enoch. I think it's pronounced Enoch, but I'm not sure. And published on February 9th, 2021. Which actually makes it significantly more modern than I thought it would be. The one thing I did find when looking into this book's background is it's actually the third book in a series called The Wicked Wild Highlanders, with the previous two following the main characters' brothers as they learn it. The first book of which is called It's Getting Scot in Here. So yeah, I guess I know what I'm reading next February. That's a long time away. So for now, here's the report card. So yeah, let's move on. Now where do we start? The cover. And the cover is the typical Harlequin romance novel, that cover that you always see. I know this is probably good for some people, but I've already made my thoughts clear on the Harlequin romance covers in general in my, I believe it was the City of Bones review. Personally, I just find the covers in general to be rather lacking and not very selling of the product itself. I mean, it is selling the product itself. It's aiming exactly where it wants to aim. It just doesn't tell you anything about the actual story itself. It's basically just two pretty people, half-dressed, hanging on each other every time. I mean, even the backgrounds are typically not in any way connected to what's going on in the story. So yeah, as far as covers go, this is, if you're looking for a Harlequin romance novel and those covers appeal to you, it's perfect. If you're me and you want covers to talk about what's inside the book more than the most superficial elements, it's very bland and boring. Like I said, I talk about it a little bit more in depth on my City of Bones review, so if you want to see me complain about Harlequin romance covers, go ahead and check that out there. So let's just go ahead and move on with the synopsis. Now, those of you who've seen my February TBR, I read this out loud on the video, so you already have a basic idea of what's going on. If you would like to see me read straight from the synopsis on the back, feel free to check out that video. But for now, let's talk about, let me give you a quick, dirty synopsis, I guess. The book itself is about a Highlander named Call MacTaggart. Call MacTaggart. I think it's Call because it's two L's and not an E, as often as I want to say Cole. He's basically the Viscount of the Scottish lands that they're from. He has to marry an English woman within 6 weeks before his little sister gets married. Otherwise, the funding from his mother's estate, who's an English woman herself, gets cut off from them, and their Scottish land can descend back into poverty because of it. Now, his two brothers have already gotten married by the time the story starts. Well, one has gotten married, one is getting married as the story starts, and apparently their stories are covered in the two books before this. However, Cole has been holding out for the longest, not wanting to be forced into marriage, simply because his mother demands it. However, as he goes, he meets a young actress named Persephone Jones, and just something about her draws him to her. So after accepting a deal to be her protector from crazy fans and someone who might have it out for her head, the two begin to grow close, and that's the majority of what the story's about. It's a romance tale. You saw the cover. You know what this book's about. This book knows what it's about. That's what happens. Now, the real question. What did I think of this book? Honestly, this book went in a direction I wasn't really expecting. I wasn't expecting this book to be good, but I mean, well, yeah, it's just, I was utterly baffled about how it ended up being, which is, it's good? Yeah, I was shocked too. I mean, I honestly picked up this book by the pun alone, thinking to myself that, okay, this book is gonna be bad. But it sounds like it's going to be a fun kind of bad. The kind of bad that makes me laugh the entire time. But as I read through it, I was honestly shocked, as I was actually somewhat invested in what was happening. I even walked away from it thinking it was decent. For example, this isn't just a romance story. Yes, that is the major focus. Don't let me steer you wrong there. But there is more going on than just these two characters are getting hot and heavy with each other. For example, The main other plot is Persephone Jones is being targeted by an assassin for reasons that she isn't quite sure on, as Cole McTaggart tries to protect her from it. That's kind of what leads to them getting together. There's a bit of mystery behind that as Cole tries to figure out who is trying to kill her and why. There's also twists about who Persephone Jones really is, as hinted on the back. There's twist about who it could be. There's twist on how the characters handle it. The characters, for example, are a lot more in depth than I was actually expecting from a book like this. Typically, in these kinds of books, they get the most basic characterizations, with maybe the main character being the exception. But typically, these books serve as fantasy books more than anything, something for you to put yourself on. So these characters tend to be blank slates, but I didn't really get that impression from this book. Persephone Jones is a smart, sarcastic, witty woman who doesn't take anything wrong. Instead of from my experience, I'm pretty sure there's plenty out there that aren't, but typically the weak, the more submissive, weak, and he's so pretty kind of girl over the main character. Now, the back describes Cole McTaggart as something of a meathead. You know, the big, brawny, but not a lot of brains up here. And I was kind of worried that would take it in the direction of... You would think he's going to be a meathead who basically stomps around while Persephone is the one who does all the thinking in the relationship.
And only someone as brave and clever as you can save her.
However, I was actually genuinely surprised that Cole isn't a meathead. He is actually clever and smart, but he just prefers to be very direct, having a bad relationship with his mother, who is very much the kind of person that likes to talk in circles or carefully manipulate situations and stuff like that. Because of his bad experiences with her, he's taught himself to be direct to the point that he comes off as very blunt. But he is smart. He is capable of thinking things through. He doesn't just run in and start swinging anytime there's a problem, even if that's what he would prefer to do, because he doesn't like talking in circles, basically, in his mind.
This is a sword, and it's bigger than yours. What do you think of that, Mr. Pajama-wearing, basket-faced, slipper-wielding?
And because of that, because both are very well characterized, there's actually genuine chemistry between them as well, instead of just kind of oh my god, you're so hot. You're so hot too. Let's, I'll probably cut that. I'm pretty sure YouTube will say no. Bad. But it doesn't feel like they're just giving into their animal lust and going after each other. It actually feels like these characters are creating an emotional bridge between the two of them. If I'm not gonna lie, this book was actually less adult than How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days for a good portion of it. I don't think the first adult scene even happens till halfway through the book. And for a book like this, you would expect, start right away. In addition to both being well characterized and having, I think I kind of talked about this, but I'm going to go over it again, I apologize. But in addition to having genuine chemistry with each other and being well characterized, that also follows through that they exist outside of each other. One of the issues with romance stories like this is it feels like the characters only exist in relation to each other. They only exist to complement each other, but no other reason. These characters, on the other hand, exist outside of that relationship. There's things Cole's have that Persephone doesn't help him get over or isn't really relevant to their relationship. He's claustrophobic, for example, which is something I didn't expect for, the big, brawny, tough guy. He has a bad relationship with his mother, and he doesn't quite have a great relationship with his father either, but it's clear he loves his brothers and sisters. Brother and sister. Well, sisters, but sisters-in-laws count. So he has a very close relationship with his family. Persephone Jones, on the other hand, is very kind and sweet outside of her sarcastic, witty dialogue. You don't get outright told it, but you get shown that she's gone out of her way to hire old theater assistants who've had to leave the theater for one reason or another. Sticks with a coachman who doesn't get a lot of business, even if she could afford better. Rescued an alley cat that she calls Hades and is now living with. It's just, there's a lot of characterization, again, where they don't exist solely to complement each other, and that's very nice. In addition, the balance of the plot lines is good. Yes, the story is mainly a romance, but the assassination plot on Persephone isn't ignored. The relationship between Cole and his mother, which takes up another good portion, isn't ignored either. even if they're far lesser in scope, they are there. Despite all this praise I've been giving it, don't let me trick you into thinking this is a great book. It's still very much a product of what it's setting out to be. And I did have issues with the book. In fact, I might even argue that the reason I have such a favorable opinion of this book right now is because, I was expecting so little of this book. What else could it do but surprise me with being decent, right? But for example, as well as plots are balanced with each other, the story does drag quite a bit, especially near the end. It just sort of, it feels like the author was kind of stretching because she needed a few extra 10 or 20 pages, but didn't have any other extra story to add in there, which is kind of unfortunate. I'll go into that later though, because there's several descriptions of what the women are wearing all of a sudden with really no priority before, it felt like. And it just, there's a couple times where you're just like, move on, and it just doesn't. In addition, the eventual wrap-up of the mystery is disappointing in my mind. In the background of this book, there's a lot of... One of the backgrounds of the book has to do with the Macbeth play. Every chapter starts with a quote from Macbeth. The Persephone plays Lady Macbeth. And, the main character is Scottish, and they make several jokes about that.
He speaks a most ancient tongue.
But you would think with so much focus on this play that they would sort of play into that idea. Maybe match the thematic elements of the story it's telling with the thematic elements of Lady Macbeth. Except it doesn't really do that. The twist of who it is very disappointing. And it's also a mystery you probably wouldn't be able to solve without extra knowledge. So in that regards, it's a very disappointing conclusion to that plot line. The only reason I'm not more upset by that is, again, look at the cover. That mystery wasn't what the book was about. I also admit that I was a little disappointed with the reveal of who Persephone Jones is. The synopsis on the back very clearly hints at what she is. I won't spoil it, but I'm going to talk around it, so if you don't want semi-spoilers, I guess skip ahead a little bit. This book talks a lot about love and how one station shouldn't dictate who you love and who you want to marry. In England, in London, the Regency area of London, actors and actresses, for example, were loved on the stage but weren't liked outside the stage. I don't know the exact specifics of why this is, but I know one thing is that one of the issues was who would ever love someone who lies for a living, basically. So when Cole McTaggart is really interested in Persephone Jones, he actually is taking a massive risk by marrying an actress while he himself is a Viscount. Or falling in love with an actress while he himself is a Viscount. However, the reveal of who Persephone Jones really is disappointing because it kind of gets rid of that through line. Yes, the book tries to go out of its way to show that that's not why Cole loves her, and as far as they're concerned, that doesn't exist. However, it still does exist. It still is revealed at the end to everyone, and it kind of undercuts the narrative that Cole's going to marry who he loves rather than who best fits his station. Because of that, it's very disappointing. I think the story would have been more interesting if they had just stuck with the fact that she was an actress and hadn't tried to make it more Regency romance, I guess. Now that I think about it, that's probably exactly why that happened. So I also admit that the resolution between Lady Aldris, who's Cole's mother, and her sons with their strained relationship is very disappointing in the long run. Now, obviously, this is from the perspective of someone who's only read the third book, so take this with a grain of salt. But Lady Aldris was their mother who married their father, and the two seem to always argue with each other. Eventually, when their little sister Eloise was born, she decided that she couldn't take anymore, took Eloise, and then fled back to London, seemingly cutting off all contact with the Scottish men of her family, including her own sons, until about 18 years later. To which she suddenly reminds them, hey, I have a contract with your father that says you have to marry English women or I cut off all funding. So obviously, the relationship between them is strained because of that. However, throughout the book, we get hints that there was more to the story than their father ever told them. One being things that, Lady Aldris and Cole get in a fight where she reveals that, hey, I did try to talk to you guys. I did send you guys letters. I did try to keep in contact. And Cole says, I sent you letters too, and you never responded. So obviously one of us is lying. However, it's revealed later on that his father, Angus, had been keeping the letters from each other. He never sent out his son's letters, and he never gave them their mother's letters. Basically meaning that this whole 18 years of no contact was entirely the father's fault. And while there is a decent lesson here about trying to say when two prideful people get together, they have to learn to compromise or they're going to destroy each other and their family. Problem is, I feel like the father gets off way too easy on what he did. Because, in my opinion, while what Lady Aldrich did was bad, it was nowhere near as bad as what Angus did. Which was literally create an environment where these boys thought their mother didn't love them. So, it's kind of one of those, I kind of wish more emphasis has been placed on Angus's fault in there, and it kind of felt like it was putting all the blame squarely on Lady Aldrich's... God. Her name is not great for my impediment. But put all the blame for the strained relationship almost squarely on Aldrich's shoulders. So, it was just one of those... But yeah, in the end, I'd give this book a 6 out of 10. Hit Me With Your Best Scot is a good book. Hit Me With Your Best Scot is a good book. Hit Me With Your Best Scot is a good... Yeah. No matter how many times I say it, it sounds wrong coming out of my mouth. Yeah, this book really isn't bad. It's slow in places. A lot of the conclusions to the various story arcs are very disappointing, with maybe the exception of the romance, which is the biggest draw of the book. I obviously didn't like some of the plot decisions made, with the big mystery being a very anticlimax. But overall, it's not a terrible book. Now again, I'm qualifying by saying this. I don't necessarily think that it's a great book. I just think that it's decent. In fact, it would depend on my day if I call it good or not. And again, a part of that might have been because I went into this book expecting the worst. So what could it have done but surprise me? But yeah, it's just... Hit Me With Your Best Scot is a decent book. But a book can be decent, but not worth the read. So the real question: does it deserve Mount Doom? Obviously not. I can actually recommend this book to anyone who likes Regency, historical Regency romances, fiction, or someone who's, into that. I will give a warning that when I was digging into this book to look for its background, that the reception on it was a lot more mixed than my own, and it was often called the worst of the Wicked Highlanders saga, or trilogy. So maybe it's just... Maybe that could be I have a far different opinion than the majority, or it could just be that the rest are a lot more better than this, and this is the weak one. But again, overall, I just think it's decent. It's not my typical genre, and I typically don't read these romance novels, so again, take it with a pinch of salt. Now, the next book. What was it? It was right on the tip of my tongue. It always happens. I forget what I'm talking about. And then it's like, I gotta figure it out again. Come on. What was it? It's not that complicated. But until next time, remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones.